Hi, this is Russell Glasser, host of the Atheist Experience. You know, the Atheist Experience is made possible by volunteers and the generous support of viewers like you. If the promotion of positive atheist culture and separation of church and state are values that you hold, please consider contributing by becoming an ACA member or visiting our product page at evolvefish.com under the Partner tab. Thank you.
We are live. It is Sunday, July 19th, 2015. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me, the president of the ACA, Jen Peeples. Send all
Hi,
your
everybody.
comments and complaints to her now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So this is a live public access television show out of Austin, Texas. And we'll have the number up, although the lines are already full. And you've got something that you're going to talk about. We don't have any like real solid announcements today other than, well, I'll let you make the one about Pride.
Yeah.
But I have a little kind of personal apology to make. When I was in Vancouver for Imagine No Religion 5, I was supposed to meet up with Brian Steeksma, who wrote our theme song. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So Brian, if you're watching, sorry. Let's see if we can't arrange to get together some other time. But I still love the song, and I hear it all the time.
Yeah. All right.
So you had something to kind of, we got an email or a Facebook post that was.
Oh, yeah. So in the wake of the Supreme Court decision a few weeks ago, basically the marriage
The
equality.
one that destroyed the world?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The world is ending. Well, Texas got invaded too. So. Yeah. So.
By fire ants or by,
Jade Helm. Yeah. Anyway, all that aside, so in the wake of the Supreme Court decision on marriage equality, we got a message on our Facebook page from a guy saying, okay, now that the gays have, equality, now it's time for atheists to have equality. And his idea was that we need to get these laws that are still on the books in some of the states that say that you have to profess a belief in God in order to hold public office. That we need to get those stricken from the books because now that the gays have marriage equality, that's the next big fight. I've had this conversation.
Welcome to 50 years ago.
Yes, I have this conversation with some deeply angry atheists at least twice a month, sometimes more often. They're just outraged that this is still on the books, and they can't understand how in the U.S., in 2015, we could still have it be the case that atheists can't run for public office in certain places.
Yeah, and this all relates to something that we're going to get to from one of the callers in a little bit, because this, I think, qualifies as one of the bad arguments or bad issues that is potentially damaging our credibility.
So what I want to say, again, I've talked about this so many times, but again, the same process that basically made marriage equality the law of the land, that's the same process that means that atheists can run for public office in any state, any locality. You cannot outlaw atheists running for public office, period. And that decision was handed down in 1961. Okay? Look up the Torcaso v. Watkins decision of 1961. Okay? Most of the people who are outraged about this were born sometime after 1961. So there has never been a time in their lifetime when they could not run for public office as an atheist. So please stop wasting time and energy and resources on this. It's done.
Yeah, one of the things is, like Herb Silverman had to fight this battle again because
Right.
because there's general ignorance about this. It's one of those things where he's going to run for office, and there's this question of whether Torcaso v. Watkins actually applies, or somebody doesn't know about it, and so they challenge his ability to run for office as an atheist, and so he won again. So it's not only did the Supreme Court, make a decision in 1961, but this has been tested again in other venues.
Right.
And we went, now it's likely to be tested again, but it's only going to be tested because of ignorance. And I think what frustrates a lot of people is they say, yes, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It always will be. Unless you completely rewrite the Constitution, which is an unbelievably difficult process, it will always say that. The most you could ever do is pass an amendment that makes that initial language in the state constitution nullified. But you're probably not going to get that amendment passed because that's very difficult, and this is an unpopular opinion. And it is pointless because the Supreme Court's decision already renders that nullified. So you're wanting to do work that you're not likely to be able to be successful at to achieve something that was already achieved 54 years ago.
Right. And you know, I go back to the law. It was actually a constitutional amendment in the state of Texas that banned gay marriage in Texas. So marriage between two people of the same sex was already banned by statute anyway. But the good Christians of Texas decided to waste the state's resources to get a constitutional amendment to like extra ban it or something. And so
that thing's been turbo banned, man.
That's right. So we extra banned gay marriage. Only if you read the wording of the constitutional amendment they passed, they actually banned marriage in Texas.
That's what happens when you try to go for double secret probation.
That's right. And so that law, that amendment to the Constitution is still technically on the books. But you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. Texas is issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples. It doesn't matter. And it's the same thing that's happening with atheists running for public office. You can run for public office. If somebody challenges you, in the last city council election in Austin, one of the people running for city council actually challenged another city council candidate saying, oh, he's an atheist and Texas law bans him from running for public office. You know what you do with that? You use that to point out the fact that they have just identified themselves as being someone who's uniquely unqualified to hold public office in this country because they don't understand anything about Supreme Court cases or case law in general. And why would you want somebody representing you, even on a city council, that is so ignorant about history and law?
Not to mention the flat-out bigotry
exactly.
of assuming that you're not going to be qualified to do your job just because you don't believe in their magical friend.
Oh, and by the way, the person that she accused of being atheist, he's actually Catholic.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we had this happen. We had this happen in 04 or 08, I guess it was, in North Carolina, where two people running. One of them accused the other one of being an atheist, who was a Sunday school teacher, by the way.
Yeah.
She just happened to meet with atheists because she wasn't one of those stupid and hateful individuals who thinks that it's irrelevant to talk to people you might disagree with.
Yeah, on one issue.
Yeah. It's frustrating.
Okay.
On that note, I guess we can probably just start with Mark.
Okay.
In Detroit. How you doing? Thanks for waiting.
Hello, yes. I don't think I've ever actually talked to you two on the show, but I have called in the past.
Cool.
So my question is basically how bad is bad arguments to the movement? Does it how much of our credibility does it take away when we make bad arguments?
A lot. I actually gave a talk in Kentucky and in Vancouver, in Vancouver, called "Hyperbole Will Destroy the World," and I chose that title mostly out of amusement, but it was about, I hate bad arguments no matter who's making them, but I especially hate them when they come from people who are ostensibly on my side of an issue, because if you make a bad argument, especially if you're in a position like ours, where people are going to listen and perhaps think, oh, that's a good idea, without doing more research on their own, which I thoroughly discourage. Don't take anything we say at face value.
Right.
Go out and research and think about it. But there are people who will. And then when they run up against somebody who knows what they're talking about, now the foundation behind what they believe is crumbling because somebody has pointed out how it's a bad argument. And the view of atheists and secularists in general from the person who destroyed that horrible argument is emboldened because they already thought that we didn't have any good reasons to hold the positions we hold. So when you offer bad reasons and they easily knock them down, this makes them think that they're even more right.
Yeah. One of the arguments that bugs me the most, you've probably heard this one before, and I hear this one all the time, and it has to do with gay marriage, is they go to the Leviticus one, and then they say, oh, and you also can't use fabrics of two kind, or you can't eat shellfish. And I'm like, most Christians do not hold to that. You're arguing against a straw man.
No, you're not. No, you're not. So if the Bible actually literally says something, You're not saying that every Christian or every believer holds to that. What you're doing is exposing that they don't, in fact, hold to that they are now picking and choosing from the Bible. And the point of doing that is to say, what is your reason for accepting this verse and rejecting this verse? Because I want to, they have to have some, now if they have a good reason to do that, then fine. It's no longer an objection. The problem is they don't seem to have a good reason for doing this.
The reason I've usually heard, and the reason why I don't usually do that argument, because I think it is they interpret Jesus came to abolish the laws, and yes, I disagree with them on that, but I don't want to argue. I don't want to argue technicalities.
Well, that's the whole thing you're arguing. Because if Jesus said, I came not to change the law but to fulfill it, and then not a jot or tittle will change until all these things go away, then he's advocating for the law. Now, you can make arguments that he wasn't advocating for all of it. They will draw lines between ceremonial laws and sacrificial laws and things like that. But they have to actually come up with a justification for it that's not just a post hoc rationalization. Yep. So if you don't feel like actually discussing the theology, by all means, you don't have to go anywhere near what the Bible says about anything. But that doesn't mean that citing what the Bible actually says is in fact a bad argument or a straw man.
I try to stick more to things like Noah's Ark, things that I can actually show. And obviously, if you don't believe in that, I'm not going to use that argument against you.
That strikes me as odd, because when the Bible says, not to wear mixed fabrics and eat shellfish, it's very, very clear and very literal, and there's almost no argument that this is metaphorical. And yet there are huge swaths of people who are Christians who don't look at the Noah story as anything other than metaphor. They don't believe that there was a global flood. They may believe there was a local flood. They may believe it was just a metaphoric story. And so to opt out of the shellfish and into the Noah story seems to be kind of weaker footing, unless you know that that's what somebody believes. Because if you talk about how absurd the Noah story is, which I'm in favor of, if their response is, yeah, but I don't think that was actually literal, and I don't even think the Bible intends it to be viewed as literal. Well, okay, now
most of the people I debate with are fundamentalists, and they actually try to explain, yes, the Noah's Ark story happened. God literally created the earth in 6 days. Like, they actually are that much.
Yep.
And so that's why I tend to do that. Obviously, learning from you guys, I have learned to adapt my arguments to who I'm talking to figure out what they actually believe, and to construct an argument against that, than to argue against to get into a middle of an argument and then go, oh wait, you don't even believe that? For instance, my dad does not believe, my dad believes hell is the grave. So if I was to have a conversation with my dad, I couldn't say, hey, God's this horrible person because he sends good people to burn for all eternity, because my dad doesn't believe that.
In that case you flip it, and you, instead of saying that if they believe in like annihilation theory, that the non-believers or whoever is undeserving or unchosen just ceases to exist, then you still point out that he's playing favorites, that he's picking and choosing who's going to get to live forever in bliss and who's not.
No, absolutely, but I try to tailor tailor my arguments to who I'm speaking to, and I've learned that from watching shows like yours, and getting better at debating by watching, and learning that not everybody has the same arguments, and not every argument's going to work on the same people. So be willing to adapt your arguments for the person you're talking to.
I absolutely agree. And on that note, we've got full lines, so I'm going to move on to another caller. But thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and have a great day.
All right.
Thanks.
So, and you had a question for line one is not working. Can we put line one live? There we go. Jerry, you there?
I am here, Matt.
How you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Pretty good.
All right. Well, I love your stuff. Awesome work. When I win the lottery, which I don't play, I'm going to hook you up. Take care of you, okay?
Well, I guess since some people say it's the thoughts that counts, I'll take it.
All right. Well, anyways, I wanted you to possibly weigh in on what seems to be a big discussion and debate for some on whether it's okay to go around calling yourself an agnostic when you're really an atheist. So stop using that agnostic, title. It really doesn't work.
I'm
sure
fine
you're
with
familiar
people. I'm fine with people using whatever label they want, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to also point out the potential problems or confusion with it. But I think you had something, because you had asked about whether or not we agree with the Huxley's definition, and
Right.
Yeah, so can you summarize for the viewers what Huxley's definition of agnostic entails?
I'll read it. It's really short. Quote, "It is wrong for a man to say that he is certain of the objective truth of any proposition unless he can produce evidence which logically justifies that certainty."
Yeah, so I don't think that absolute certainty is possible, so everything Huxley just said is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But
Now,
if he
there's
defines
another aspect.
agnosticism in that way, what would be the problem per se of saying I am agnostic?
Well, I mean, if your argument for agnosticism is that you don't see a path to certainty with regard to either proposition, you've completely, first of all, I don't see a path to certainty anywhere for anything.
Right.
You've misrepresented what knowledge means, because virtually, now granted we've come a long way since Huxley, but virtually no modern philosopher considers absolute certainty to be a component of knowledge. The most normative definition is justified true belief, which is not an appeal to certainty at all. But the other thing is you're avoiding the issue, because we assess individual statements like some God exists. You either believe that or you don't. There's no middle ground with respect to that statement. There is middle ground with respect to a question. So if the question is, does God exist? The people who would say, yes, I believe that's the case, are theists, because they are accepting the proposition that a God exists. Anybody who doesn't accept that proposition is a non-theist, and I would say an atheist in the weak sense. And only the people who accept the proposition no gods exist would qualify as strong atheists or anti-theists, or however you want to label the position. But that position is irrelevant. That would be what I would consider to be the null hypothesis. And through this entire conversation, it's about, do you believe it? Do you think you have good reason to rationally accept it? And belief and knowledge are not synonymous. Knowledge is a subset of belief. So if somebody says, do you believe that God exists? And you say, I'm agnostic, you have not answered the question.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, you did a lecture on this.
I did a couple different ways, but I did one on belief and knowledge, and
I think it's posted on our website.
Yeah, with Venn diagrams and everything that look like boobs,
Okay.
but I didn't know that when I put the Venn diagrams together.
Now, would the very definition of God add to this discussion? Because, God can be defined in so many different ways. So perhaps a person could be an atheist in one sense and maybe not in another.
So this is what I thought you were getting at when you talked about Huxley's definition, because Huxley specifically had this view that the proposition or the propositions about God were unknown and unknowable. And I think that I'm fine with accepting that they're unknown, that we haven't solved this issue. And I'm fine with saying that so far it doesn't seem that it's possible for us to resolve it. But to say it is unknowable, especially when you're somebody like Huxley who's talking about certainty, it seems to me that he's saying that this topic is by definition impossible to assess and forever will be when you say unknowable.
Yeah.
And I object to that, because if there is in fact a God who manifests in reality in some detectable way, then that's a testable proposition. In fact, everybody who believes, or most of the people who believe and think they have good reasons for it, are claiming to be little God detectors. They believe in a falsifiable God, they just can't defend it.
Okay. Yeah, it does seem like he went too far. I would agree with that. Now, can we rule out the possibility, to use an analogy, that we are some beings like ant farm and not really know for sure that is a possibility?
So I had an interesting discussion with Blake Junta. I debated him last week, and we're going to be doing a podcast or two coming up. His view is that everything is possible until it's demonstrated to be impossible, and I reject that. I think that possibility needs to be demonstrated and that impossibility needs to be demonstrated, and until such time as either's been demonstrated, then what you should say it is that it is not possible and not impossible, or that these two haven't been demonstrated. So when you say, can we rule this out? No. Just like we don't have a solution to hard solipsism. I can't rule out the possibility that I'm a brain in a vat because I have currently no way to assess it. That doesn't mean that it is forever unknowable or unaccessible.
Right. So are you saying that, maybe we're just creating doubts when we really don't need to? We should just, take what we see and reason and whatnot and follow wherever it leads? Or?
Well, I'm not sure we have much other choice, if I understand your question correctly.
I guess my point would be is that we, like if I say, well, what if we are some beings, ant farm? Why should we even, maybe I'm just speculating why we should even bother thinking that in the first place.
Oh, I don't think we should spend a whole lot of time on it until somebody demonstrates that there's good reason to spend a lot of time on it. There are some big questions in philosophy that I did a podcast this week on the ship of Theseus and the problem of identity. And I don't think that that's a problem that's particularly solvable. And it may be so muddy because it's about language and how we label things. I enjoy those conversations. I enjoy thinking about those things, and so do a lot of other philosophers. But they're not currently important, and they don't become particularly important until we demonstrate that we're likely to be able to solve them, and that they're likely to have an impact. There are much bigger issues in every person's individual daily life, and certainly more important issues for the world, as long as there are still people starving and dying and subjected to religious indoctrination and other superstitious things that are causing harm. So it doesn't really matter whether or not we have a solution to hard solipsism or the ship of Theseus or the problem of induction or whatever big philosophical issue some of us would like to sit around and think about. Those aren't nearly as important as the other issues.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. But if you have those people that will make it that big of an issue and, almost want to ostracize you, you just called yourself an agnostic, to get out of here, Some people seem to take it that seriously, so I was just, wondering where you weighed in on that.
Yeah, if I'm talking about something important and somebody is wanting me to talk about something unimportant and they want to ostracize me, good.
Yeah.
I've got better things to do with my time.
Yeah. Amen to that. All right, very well, Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
All right, bye.
Bye.
I want to hold off on that one so that we can, I'll let you do Josh, if we can put 3 on, so that I'm not the only one that talks on the show. There we go. Hey, Josh.
Hi, how are you?
Pretty good.
So you had a question?
Yes, I'm a Christian, and I had a couple questions, if I could ask one real quick.
Okay.
My first question was, what proof or evidence can you guys provide that would justify your reason for not believing in God?
Well, the question is not that we have to justify non-belief, it's that you have to justify what you do believe. So what's your proof or evidence that justifies your belief?
Well, the thing is, though, I see your point, but many people say that atheism is the lack of belief or disbelief in God, but the thing is,
Correct.
To me, it doesn't really matter whether theism is the belief that God exists or whether it's just the lack of disbelief in God or what atheism is. I really think evidence is mandatory for both sides.
No.
No, it's not. There's a burden of proof.
Evidence would be mandatory if we were asserting that God does not exist.
Well, but the thing is, though, saying that I don't believe you, I would like if someone said, there's a cookie in the pantry, and I said, I don't believe you, they may ask me to justify that, right?
No, you don't need justification for not believing that there's a cookie in the pantry.
It's the default position.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Matt also brought up this thing that said, if you can't prove something, then you shouldn't believe it, right?
Yes.
Well, the thing is, though, then that really doesn't give me any reason to believe that there is no God. whether
No,
you
no,
assert
no,
it
no,
or
no.
not, because hold on. I'm not
No,
finished.
no, you hold on, because you said person A claims there's a cookie in the cabinet, and I don't believe them. That's not a belief. It is a rejection of their claim. I am not yet convinced. That doesn't mean that I'm convinced there's no cookie in there. It's just like in a courtroom, we have a default presumption of innocence, and it's the prosecution has to demonstrate guilt. I find God not guilty of existing, which is not the same thing as innocent, and the defense doesn't have to provide any defense.
Well, if you can't, nobody really has been able to provide any convincing evidence that there is no God, whether they assert it or not.
No one has to do that.
What difference does that make?
I was talking to David Silverman one time, and he said there is no God, and
Okay.
so
Okay.
that does mean he has the burden of proof. But the
Sure.
thing
So
is,
call David
when
and
I
ask him to defend it.
I asked him to defend it, yes, and he said the problem of evil was his evidence
Fine.
that God does not exist.
Look,
But I find that
Josh,
to be,
Josh, I'm not
Yes?
David Silverman. If you want to argue David Silverman's points, you can call David Silverman. If you want to argue our position, you call us. Which one you want to do?
all right, fine. All right, okay. So you asked for evidence, right?
Sorry?
You asked for evidence that God exists.
Yeah, Jen asked why you believe.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I believe because I don't think it's really logical to be a non-believer after what I've seen, because I've seen the debates between atheists and theists, but the thing is, when I watch the debates, many atheists and theists now agree that the universe had a beginning. Do you agree with that?
It depends very much on
Yeah.
on definitions.
Okay, so, do you believe that the universe had a beginning?
Like I
Like
said,
s-
it depends
yeah.
on definitions because
And you know what? I really think it's irrelevant to your claim that your God exists.
Well,
Because
but
you said
hold on.
you're a Christian, so you believe in a
irrelevant.
specific God.
What's irrelevant?
I think this whole, I guess, intellectual exercise about the beginnings of the universe is irrelevant because you believe in a specific God.
Well, but the thing is, the way I see it, atheists often used to argue that the universe is eternal. And people have done that, and some people still do that now.
So are you once again trying to saddle us with some position that we don't hold? Because if you keep
No, I'm
trying
not-
to get us to argue
no,
for
I'm just-
positions that we don't hold,
No,
I'm not going to
I'm-
continue the call.
No, dude, no. What I'm doing is I was just giving an example of something that people sometimes argue.
Well,
And I'm not saying
you
that
know,
you hold this position.
you know,
I'm not
theists,
saying that.
theists,
I am
used,
not saying that.
theists used to argue for the omnis, that God was omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. But modern theologians have refined that so that they're no longer logically self-contradictory. Instead, when they talk about omnipotence, they don't mean all-powerful, they mean maximally powerful, all-powerful that is logically possible. And
Wait,
similar.
self-contradictory. How
Sorry,
is that
what?
self-contradictory?
What?
How is that self-contradictory?
How is what self-contradictory? Omnipotence?
Yes, exactly. How is that? Yeah,
Can
how is
God
that
make a rock so big he can't lift it?
Logic is part of his nature. God
No. That doesn't answer the question at all. Do you believe that God can violate the laws of logic?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
then you, like most modern theists, reject the original versions of omnipotence, which
But
would.
it's really because he doesn't deny his nature. There's
Josh.
a difference in saying, but there's a difference in saying that someone does not deny their nature. That's self-contradictory. Saying that someone can deny their nature.
I'm not interested in your post hoc rationalizations or your denial of what I'm saying. You don't believe something, and I'm pointing out why. Because the naive claim of omnipotence has been demonstrated to be logically contradictory. This is why theologians
As
have.
a square circle. The square circle is also self-contradictory.
Yes, which is why it doesn't exist, right?
Exactly.
Right.
This is why.
This is
I'm not
why,
an atheist.
Jesus
But this is why I'm
Christ,
not an
Josh,
atheist,
if you don't let me
because-
finish a sentence, I'm going to hang up on your ass.
Fine. All right.
This is why I'm trying to help you not be stupider in your argument. There's a reason why the old view of omnipotence was tossed aside by the people who believe that God is all-powerful. And the new version is maximally powerful, that God has all power, all possible power that is not logically contradictory. That solves all the problems that the old version of omnipotence had, so now they can claim that there's a God that is maximally powerful. Which is, by the way, I think what you would accept, right?
Well, right now I'm not talking about an omniscient God or anything. Right now I'm just talking about evidence for God, right?
No.
I'm not making a claim to omniscience. I'm not making a claim to omnipotence.
Josh.
I'm not making a claim of omnibenevolence. Right now I'm just talking about evidence, right? Okay?
Okay, we tried to get you to talk about that before, but if you want to
Yeah,
revisit
when we
that.
asked you for evidence, what you talked about was an outdated version of the definition of a universe. And what I would have responded with is that there's now a distinction in the modern world between, for example, the cosmos, which is everything, it's the umbrella term, which may include the multiverse or many universes or alternate realities, the cosmos being everything that has ever existed. And under that model, it's not necessarily clear that the cosmos, in fact, had a beginning at all.
Okay, what evidence is there that it's eternal?
No one said
Okay.
it's eternal. No one. We just said that there's no evidence to believe that it had a beginning.
But that doesn't mean it didn't have a beginning.
Correct.
Absence of
Correct.
evidence is not evidence of absence.
Actually, what that statement means, absence of evidence is not evidence for absence, is true, but absence of evidence is evidence for absence when evidence would be expected.
How?
Excuse me? I tell you what, Josh, interrupt me before I finish the sentence again and you can listen on hold. I'm getting ready to tell you, if you would just have a measure of patience. Absence of evidence is evidence for, not confirmation of, but evidence for absence in the cases where evidence would be expected. For example, if you were to say, I have a dead human cadaver in the trunk of my car, and we go out and we open your trunk and we find no cadaver, that is an absence of evidence for your claim, which you can come up with post hoc rationalizations for by saying, well, it got moved or it got shuffled away by corpse removing pixies.
It's invisible.
Or it's invisible. But it is in fact evidence for the conclusion that you are wrong. It isn't on its own enough confirmation to be confirmation that you're wrong. But the nature of the claim that you have a dead body in your trunk, is something that you have to provide evidence for. And if we can look at the claim and say, if this claim were true, we would see A, B, C, D, and E. And then we go out and we find not A, not B, not C, not D, not E, then that absence of evidence is evidence against your claim. It is not enough to confirm that your claim is false, but it is evidence against the proposition.
It's the same on both sides, though, because that if there's an absence of evidence that there is no God, then I can say the same thing for you. And I know that you're not asserting that right now. I know
Yes.
that you're not. But that doesn't mean
So
you
yet
don't.
you just keep right
But
on
that
bringing
doesn't
it
mean-
up,
but
and
that
every
doesn't mean
time,
you don't.
every single time we've offered an example, you want to reframe the example in terms of the contrary. When we say there's no good reason to believe that the cosmos isn't eternal, you made it as if we're saying it is eternal and want us to provide evidence for it. That wasn't the claim we made.
Let me ask you this, though. So
Okay.
let's say John Doe killed Buck Masters. Let's say that. Let's see this in a scenario.
John Doe killed what?
Killed Buck Masters.
Okay, John Doe killed Buck Masters.
Okay, so the cops are investigating, but they have no evidence that he killed Buck Masters.
Okay.
Is that really evidence that Buck didn't do it?
It is evidence against the proposition if there would be evidence, if we would expect evidence for it. Is it confirmation that he's innocent? No.
But how does it prove that he didn't do it?
It
Because-
doesn't.
But if that's the case, then if that's the case, then that means really it's not evidence, because
No.
many criminologists will tell you this. I don't really see how.
Are you a criminologist?
I'm not a criminologist.
Do you
but
have
that's
any
not the point.
expertise in the field, or are you just parroting what you've heard?
What do you mean?
Well, you're going to go to criminologists, and neither one of us is a criminologist. I don't know why we would go to that when I would hope that we would both agree that it is up to the prosecution to present evidence that John Doe did in fact kill Buck Masterson, and absent evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, we must rule not guilty.
Okay, sir.
Yes or
Okay,
no?
well, that portion makes sense, because
Correct.
if you don't
So
have evidence,
if somebody claims that a God exists, they believe
Which I
that
did not.
what?
which I did not do.
Okay, so you're not
So-
claiming a God exists.
So you're not a Christian?
No, I believe I believe that God exists. Making
Okay.
a claim of fact.
So
and
if
making a
somebody
claim of
claims
belief are
that
two
they
different things.
believe that a God exists,
I believe that a God exists.
you
Yes,
believe
but
you believe that claim is true.
I believe that God exists. Let's
Right.
just say that, okay?
You
so
believe-
you don't, but
Jesus.
you don't believe that God exists, right?
I do not believe your claim. Please make your case.
It's let me give you some philosophical reasons to
Let's not.
believe that,
Yeah.
that the universe. Let me give you a philosophical reason why.
No.
Let's
don't,
not.
And
Let's
philosophy is not
answer
dead.
the actual question that was asked.
Philosophical things can be evidence because
No, they
No.
can't.
how is it not? Are you saying that philosophy is dead?
No, actually, I
No.
spend a great deal of time studying and arguing philosophy. I'm saying that without a tie to anything material or epistemic, you have no case. So, and,
All right.
and
Do you
considering,
believe that do you
considering, Josh, considering your inability to construct a proper argument so far and your failure to understand that a disbelief of a claim is not a belief in its contrary, I'm not convinced you could make a philosophical argument.
All right. Okay. Do you believe that the universe is fine-tuned? Stephen Hawking does.
Excuse me?
Like the universe is precisely
You
fine-tuned.
do know that
as
Stephen
in-
Hawking doesn't believe in a God, correct?
Well, no, but that's not the point.
So
That's not the point. The point is he believes that the universe is fine-tuned. Do you
no, he
believe
doesn't
No, he
believe
doesn't.
the universe is fine-tuned in the sense that you're implying by an agent. He accepts that there's an appearance of fine-tuning, the anthropic principle, which doesn't require any sort of intervention from a supernatural agent.
I'm not implying that God did it right now. I'm just asking if you believe that the universe is fine-tuned. Yes? or
No. Well, it depends.
Okay,
What,
so
Yeah,
what,
what do you
what do
mean?
you mean by fine-tuned?
What I mean by fine-tuned is there are physical constants in the universe that we live in. In other words, if you change even one physical constant in even the slightest way, there would be a universal catastrophe. Many people now believe this, not just
Yes.
theists. Atheists believe this too. Like I said, like Stephen Hawking,
Yes.
he agrees.
Yes.
He agrees that the universe
Yes.
is
Yes,
actually
we
fine-tuned.
agree.
Yes!
Move on, please.
Next.
Okay, but the thing is, I would like to ask you, if that is true, how would you explain that?
Okay, goodbye.
Yeah.
That, my friend, hang up on line 3 because my thing's not working. Thank you. That, my friend, is the beginnings of an argument from ignorance fallacy,
Yeah.
or actually argument from personal incredulity, that here's something that we don't seem to have an explanation for, and if you can't explain it, therefore I'm justified in accepting that my magical explanation is real. This is the same thing that was asked of me in a different context when somebody talked about how much Moses seemed to know about physics and reality, and how did he know that if it wasn't divine intervention? And even if I have no answer to the fine-tuning of the universe, that doesn't get us 1 nanometer closer to your proposition that your explanation that a God did it is more reasonable. This is why not only can you not construct a proper philosophical argument or a proper valid and sound argument, you are in way out of your depth because you're just talking about as many different things as you can. You are so horribly confused about the topics that you even referenced Hawking as if an appeal to an authority would be enough to make me question, oh, no. Because what you think of as fine-tuning and what you draw from it is completely different from one of the foremost experts in the field that you cited. You actually have to come with something really strong to get over scientific consensus. You have to come up with something really strong to show that the greatest minds who have looked at this are wrong. Not that they're necessarily right. Not that because some authority says it makes it right or that it's right until. It is just, this is the most reasonable explanation until such time as you demonstrate that it's wrong. But if we're in a position where there's no explanation, where we have no idea why the universal constants are the way they are, and you think that you do have an explanation, and your explanation is the God of the Bible, you cannot come with, well, you can't explain that. Tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that. No wonder Silverman didn't finish talking to you.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
so can we talk to Will because he emailed us about this?
yeah. We'll talk to Will and then we'll get to Ken in a moment, so hang tight, Ken.
All right.
Hey, Will, thanks for wading through that.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, no problem.
To recap what the email was, this is probably going to be a little more boring than the last call. I have a 9-year-old daughter who is here with me, and we wanted to call in because over the last week, she has been having some fear or uncomfortable feelings when thinking about dying. And I know all of the things that we as atheists typically say to other adults about the prospect of death being the end of everything. And when talking with my wife, I've found that talking to an adult is significantly different than talking to a child for me, especially because as a Christian, being raised as a Christian and now an atheist, this wasn't a fear I had as a child because there was the heaven proposition that was very comforting. And the responses about, nothing isn't particularly a bad thing, and you remember before you being born as being bad, and think about all of the life you've got to live before and all the great things that are going to happen, they're not as comforting to a child as they are naturally to an adult. So I was hoping maybe Jen, as kind of the atheist parenting representative on the show in many cases, have you had this conversation with your kid?
Well, I mean,
anything to share?
One of the reasons that I wanted to take your call is because we're actually confronting a similar situation with our son, my wife and I. Turns out our brother-in-law was recently diagnosed with cancer, and it's a pretty grim diagnosis. Okay, and so we're approaching that conversation with our son. We've broached it briefly. We haven't gotten very much into specifics. But he knows that his Uncle Tim is very sick and that basically he's not going to survive. This hasn't been real for him yet because he hasn't seen his uncle since the diagnosis. We've got a family trip coming up in a few weeks, and he's going to see firsthand what this is, what his uncle's going through and what his cousins are going through. So, I know we're going to have this conversation. I think that there's not any sort of necessarily one thing you can say to a child in this situation that's going to make them more comfortable with it or less fearful. About the only thing you can do is encourage them to continue talking about their feelings. And I know that my son tends not to talk about his feelings at first. And at some point, the barriers come down, and then, usually it's lots of crying and everything, and then we get a lot out of him at that point. But, we work with him through that. We try to support him emotionally. We've had situations where a pet died or something like that. So we kind of know how he handles grief a little bit. We're really not sure how it's going to play out with this situation. And I know you're dealing with a very similar situation with your daughter. Is it that she's afraid of her own mortality or for someone else?
Well, the way she's expressed it is that she's afraid of being dead and it being nothing. Okay. I think it's related to something you just said. I think it's related to my own cancer diagnosis. It's not fatal, not mortal or anything, but yeah. I think scary. But her expression of it has been in thinking about being dead and dying and being afraid of it being nothing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't have any kids, so I should probably shut up. But I'm terrible at shutting up. I normally, when I talk to people about this, I do what you mentioned earlier, which is what was it like to not be alive yet? Because that's, so far as we know, that's what it would be like to be dead. There's no such thing as being dead,
Right.
And so I don't see that there's anything in particular to be afraid of. To me, what I struggle with is the loss.
Right.
And what we talk about quite often in the community is about, the value of life. And when I look at it, it's like, she's 9, so I don't know when her birthday is, but I would imagine, has she had a really good birthday party?
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. That birthday party ended at some point. If we were to spend the entire birthday party worried about when it was going to end and what it was going to feel like to no longer be at the birthday party, that would ruin the party. And I tend to look at it in this pragmatic sense of, I want to have fun at the party and I want the party to be good. So since I can't do anything about the fact that it's going to end and that some point in the future I'm going to be in a situation where I'm no longer at the party, I can't change that. But I can change what I do right now, and that's gonna determine how good that party is. And that analogy stretches all the way throughout life. That yes, it's incredibly sad when we lose people that we love, when they die, when they no longer exist. We have their memories, though, which we can value, and we have the time that we spent with them. And I tend to look at my own life. I don't worry about what it's going to be like to be dead, because I don't think that that's a coherent, it doesn't make sense to me. It won't be like anything. It's not anything. I just stop existing. But I'm fairly confident for some period of time, there are people who are in my life now who will have fond memories. They'll look back on the fun things we did, the time Matt said something stupid on the show, or the time we went and saw this movie, or that one cool party we had, and they will have those things. And while I won't still be alive in any real sense, I'll be alive in the only sense that I can think of that matters. And those things actually make me happier. Would I love to live forever or seemingly forever? Yeah. All of our ancestors throughout history have tried to find ways to avoid death and sat around worrying about what happens after death. I think if we start earlier, teaching people that death is a natural part of this process of life, so that they develop the tools early of how to cope with it, then we hopefully will have less anguish during the process of dying and immediately after, and we can get on to the point of healing and valuing life. Because if all we do is sit around worrying about it, we've crippled the only life that we know we're going to have. If it turns out afterlife, there's some bonus afterlife, well, great. Then you know that's like finding out that the party gets to keep going when you thought it was going to be over.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really good advice for a young kid. Had a similar conversation with our son last year, because he was obsessing over, the end of summer vacation, and it's, it was just in tears because his summer vacation was over and he didn't want it to be. And so, we had to have this conversation with him about, yeah, but you're ruining, all the excitement with school starting back up, and you've got a new year ahead of you, and there will be holidays coming up. His favorite holiday is Halloween, and that's just around the corner. And, and after a while, he started to realize that, yeah, you can't worry about the fact that summer vacation's gone. You got other things to look forward to now. And I think it's the same thing with, preparing kids for death.
Oh, and I think something Jen said earlier is not to be overlooked. When we talk about, we both kind of alluded to ruining the party by worrying about when it ends. Don't ever beat yourself up for how you feel about something.
Right.
If in fact you're sitting at the party and you start to worry about, oh my gosh, it's going to end and I don't want it to end and that's so sad, that's perfectly normal and understandable and acceptable. And when you recognize that this is a natural process of how you feel and how you think about things, that will help you deal with it so that it perhaps has less impact later. But those feelings aren't wrong or bad. That's just you. And we're all like that. None of us want to die. None of us want the party to be over. Matter of fact, my favorite quote from Christopher Hitchens has nothing to do with religion. It was during the time as he was dying, when he said, it's not at all like people suspect that you're being told the party is about to be over. In his view, you're being told the party's going to continue, but you have to leave. And that was the part that kind of hurt him. And I think that's incredibly telling about who we are and how we feel about things. And never, ever beat yourself up too much over how you feel about them. Just be aware of it. And cherish that too, because that's what makes you special and shows that you care about life and you care about people and you care about yourself, and all those things are good.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I would say is that sometimes, when a kid has lost someone or something important to them, and they just become, overwhelmed with grief, then the best thing you can do is just acknowledge that and just be there for them. So,
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, hey, can you say thanks?
Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you.
We
You guys really make a difference every week. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks.
So one of the calls that I was wanting to actually take
He bailed.
has evidently hung up. He wanted to challenge my claim that I'm more moral than the God of the Bible.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a pretty quick challenge, though,
Yeah.
because, depending on what your definition or what you think about the God of the Bible, if you think he did, in fact, drown almost everybody except for 8 people, I'd never do that.
Yeah.
So I win.
Yeah.
I also don't put men and women as unequal to the point where women are basically property and slaves. I don't endorse slavery. I don't endorse beating people as long as they don't die within a couple days. I don't endorse the idea of eternal torment or eternal annihilation for finite crimes, or worse yet, thought crimes, where someone is just living an intellectually honest life and saying, I can't believe this because they don't have insufficient evidence, and then punishing them for that.
And I would never allow my child to be tortured in my place, just because I couldn't think of a better way to solve a problem.
And I certainly wouldn't hide playing the world's longest game of hide and seek, expecting people to find me when I have the power to be unfindable, and then fill people's heads with ideas about life and death that they have no good reason to think are true, so that even lifelong atheists sometimes wake up in the middle of the night with a fear of the hell that they were indoctrinated with. And if this were to happen on my watch as God, I would step in and correct it. And that doesn't happen. Not only am I more moral than the God of the Bible, so are you. So is almost every single person I've ever met, including some horrible people, perhaps even some serial killers who just haven't killed as many people as the God of the Bible is reported to have done. But we got time for 1 or 2 more? Let's see.
We got almost 6 minutes, so, about 5 counting.
Well, here's somebody calling from Ireland. So is it Cara in Longford?
Yes.
Thank you for waiting.
That's me. Oh, wow. I can't believe I'm through. And to my 2 favorite hosts as well.
Awesome.
Hi. How are you?
Hi.
I just came over all stuttery. I apologize.
No worries.
So I wanted to talk about you promote positive atheism and the separation of church and state. So I'm curious about how that works in a place like America that has it doesn't have a state-sponsored religion to the extent that Ireland does. For example, I can't say I'm an atheist. I have to say non-Catholic and sort of explain from there, because there isn't a word in my small town, my small community, for atheist that is satisfactory to the people I interact with. And we don't have separation of church and state in terms of like Easter and Christmas and things. Everything shuts down.
Well, everything shuts down
here
here too. Everything shuts down here too or almost everything for Easter and Christmas. Actually, mostly Christmas. And that's actually just a matter of practicality, because Christmas, despite having some fairly strong Christian origins, is not, in fact, a Christian holiday, at least not the way it's celebrated in the West. When you ask people to list the 5 or 10 things that they first think of when they think of Christmas, Jesus and anything religious would be lucky to crack the top 5. Because the things that they think of, presents and dinner with family and snow and snowmen and trees and shopping, and none of those things are Christian. And some of them, Christian was actually expressly outlawed by Puritans and others who were Christian. So it's just kind of practical for the United States to make this a federal holiday, because they know almost everybody's going to take that day off anyway, because the bulk of the population celebrates it. Like 90% of Americans or more celebrate Christmas, and only 70% are Christian. 70%, and some of the Christians don't celebrate it. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But as far as church-state separation, I don't know that you can actually get proper church-state separation when you have a state religion, but there are ways to lobby for laws that would establish something like church-state separation that would say, yes, in fact, we have a state. I would actually be lobbying to abolish the state religion.
Yeah.
And there are places that have done that. It's just, in the UK, well, it's going to be different in Ireland, and I apologize. In the UK, the C of E is pretty much a big joke, and nobody really cares that there's a state religion because it just doesn't factor into much of anything. In Ireland, it's different.
Very different. You say that Christmas is about, family and stuff. Here, it's about, are you going to midnight mass or morning mass?
Yeah.
And if you're not going to either, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I think what you need. Oh, go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is one of the things that you can do, and this is if you're comfortable being out as an atheist, is to be open with the fact that you don't believe. This is one of the things that I think really turned the tide for the whole gay rights movement, was people being open about it and not hiding in a closet.
No, I understand that, and that's a huge thing. And my family are atheists. Well, my mother would tell you she's a pagan on a bad day, but also I do a lot of volunteer work in my small town, and I'm interacting with nuns quite regularly. And these are women who've dedicated their life to doing good, and while they've done that in the name of a religion, I can't find myself to take it against them. So I hate to cause offense.
Yeah, and what you may find is that a lot of them may not actually believe the religious supernatural aspects. We have, the Clergy Project Worldwide, which is talking to people who are members of the clergy who don't actually believe anymore. We're finding this to be more common. My hope is that someday you'll be able to say you're an atheist, and the Catholics around you won't be confused, because we've
not just
educated
confused,
them.
Upset.
Yeah.
Well, upset is something they're just going to have to deal with.
Yeah, you can't be responsible for their emotional reaction to you saying who you are.
Yeah. So there's
but
big.
I also.
I apologize,
Sorry.
but we've run completely out of time. They're actually getting ready to put the credits up. You can call back again next week, or you can email us tv@atheist-community.org. And it's right there.
I emailed you before, and you emailed me back a really nice message, Matt, so thank you.
Oh, good. Well,
And
you're
thanks
one
for
of the
talking to
5
me.
then, because I have like 6,000 unread email.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cara, so much for calling. I appreciate it. Thanks to all the people who make this show possible, and our studio audience who's joined us this week. We'll be going to El Arroyo after the show, and they try to put the address up. Bye-bye.
Bye.